Welcome back to our series on the broken blueprint. In this video, we're looking at 3 institutions that face the same ultimatum: adapt to the world or die. We'll examine the tragic collapse of Atlantic Union College, which went bankrupt chasing secular standards, the lost blueprint of Madison College, the school Ellen White called our normative model, and Loma Linda University, a global medical powerhouse that some fear has traded its spiritual right arm for a scientific one.
You know, that question from the book of Matthew, it really cuts right to the heart of what we're talking about today. For these Adventist schools, gaining the world wasn't some abstract idea. It meant getting academic accreditation, getting access to federal funding, and earning that scientific prestige. It looked like survival, like success. But the question is, at what cost? What part of their soul, their unique God-given mission, was on the line?
So that's the big question we have to ask. Did accreditation save these schools, or did it strip them of the very mission they were built to protect? Was chasing those worldly standards a smart move for survival, or was it a deal that ultimately cost them everything? Let's dive into the history the textbooks probably won't tell you.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about Atlantic Union College, or AUC. Its story is, well, it's a powerful cautionary tale about what can happen when the pursuit of secular standards goes horribly wrong. This was supposed to be a flagship school, you know? Its downfall really sent a shockwave through the entire Adventist education system.
When you look at this timeline, you can see exactly how the dominoes fell. AUC was founded way back in 1882, but the real trouble started much later. To keep its accreditation, which is basically the academic world's seal of approval, it had to spend a ton of money. Money on its campus, on its faculty, all to compete with secular schools on their own terms. By 2008, the financial pressure was just too much, and they were put on probation. But the knockout punch came in 2011, when they lost that accreditation for good. See, without it, students can't get federal loans, and without students who can pay, enrollment just cratered. The school went into a death spiral and finally had to shut its doors permanently in 2018.
It's the perfect example of what you'd call a debt trap. The very thing that was supposed to prove the school was legitimate, accreditation, actually became the very engine of its destruction. The standards just demanded more and more spending, way more than the school's model could ever support. It's almost like it was accredited to death. It's a really stark lesson about the hidden price of chasing worldly validation. Now, let's turn to a different but just as tragic story.
Our second case is Madison College. Now, if AUC's story is about a financial collapse, Madison's is really about a spiritual one. This wasn't just another school. It was held up as the ideal, the perfect model for Adventist education. Its story is all about how that ideal got lost. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. Madison College had this incredible endorsement from Ellen White herself. She called it the normative model, meaning this was the standard, the one everyone else should look to. It was founded with her direct input, and its whole philosophy was just radically different. It was built from the ground up to be completely independent of the world.
So you can see here, there were 2 totally different paths Madison could have followed, and the one it ended up choosing. On the left, you've got the original model. That was the pure blueprint. The focus wasn't on getting a degree, but on learning practical, hands-on skills for the mission field. Students worked to pay their tuition, often on the school's farm. It was this self-contained, self-supporting system, totally insulated from the world. But as time went on, this new pressure started building, especially for things like nursing and medicine. To get licensed, you needed an accredited degree. And that pushed the school toward the model on the right. The focus shifted from the farm to the classroom, from practical labor to academic degrees. Suddenly, the goal was to compete head-to-head with other colleges.
And that's the real tragedy of Madison. In its attempt to become a modern, accredited school, it lost the very thing that made it so special. That self-supporting work model, which was its greatest strength, started to be seen as old-fashioned and inefficient. By the time the school finally closed in 1964, you could argue it had already lost its soul long before. It had given up the blueprint, and in doing that, it gave up its whole reason for being. Now let's look at our third and, honestly, most complex case.
This brings us to Loma Linda University. This story, it's different. I mean, by any worldly measure, Loma Linda is a massive, staggering success. It's a global leader in healthcare. But that success came from a series of choices that completely transformed it. It leads some to wonder if it's now living in a gilded cage, you know, beautiful and successful on the outside, but trapped by the very system it was created to be an alternative to.
So how did this happen? Well, the transformation really kicked off with a major threat. Back in 1910, this thing called the Flexner Report came out, and it was designed to standardize medical schools. It basically aimed to shut down any school that didn't meet its really tough science-first criteria. A lot of faith-based schools at the time didn't. So Loma Linda had a choice: conform or die. They chose to go for what was called A-grade status, and that decision had huge consequences. To stay accredited, they had to adopt the standard American medical curriculum. This meant shifting away from their roots in natural healing, the old sanitarial model, and embracing the high-tech, intervention-based model of modern medicine. The result? The massive corporate healthcare giant we see today.
Now, to really get the critique here, we have to understand this concept of the right arm. That term comes from the idea that the church's medical work was meant to be the right arm of the gospel. It was a gospel medical missionary focus, where healing someone's body was seen as inseparable from healing their soul. It was the outreach, the helping hand of the church's spiritual mission.
And so the critical argument that people make is this: in its pursuit of worldly prestige, Loma Linda's right arm became a scientific arm first and foremost. The spiritual mission, while it's definitely still there, arguably took a back seat to the demands of being a world-class, top-tier medical center. To operate on that level, it has to function like any other major healthcare corporation, hiring thousands of non-Adventist staff, and in doing so, culturally diluting its original, unique mission.
So, what do we learn when we put these three very different stories together? You have the closed doors of AUC, the lost identity of Madison, and the complicated success of Loma Linda. Each one offers a final, sobering warning for any institution that's facing this kind of choice today.
This table just lays it all out with such stark clarity. Atlantic Union is gone because it simply couldn't afford to play by the world's rules. Madison dissolved because it abandoned the very blueprint that made it special in the first place. And Loma Linda? It achieved incredible global success, but it did so by adapting its mission into a model that looks a lot like the world it was supposed to be an alternative to. 3 different schools, 3 different fates, but all of them born from that same fundamental conflict.
So what have we really learned here? Well, a few big things stand out. First, we've seen that the price of meeting secular standards can be absolutely fatal, like it was for AUC. We've seen that chasing the world's approval can completely erase a school's unique identity, and that was Madison's tragedy. And maybe most importantly, we see that what the world calls success might actually require a deep spiritual compromise. That's the question that still hangs over Loma Linda. At the end of the day, each one of these schools stood at a crossroads, forced to choose between their original mission and what looked like survival.
So, let's talk about the long-term results. What happened after choosing this path? What was the ultimate price for chasing that piece of paper, that worldly seal of approval?
You know, the shift in identity is captured perfectly just by looking at the names. You don't need a long history lesson, just read the list. Emmanuel Missionary College becomes Andrews University. Washington Missionary College becomes Washington Adventist University. The College of Medical Evangelists becomes Loma Linda University. The very words that define their core purpose, missionary, evangelist, were literally scrubbed from the names of our flagship institutions. They were replaced by the generic, worldly approved term, university. The change in mission is right there in plain sight.
And so, the journey of these 3 institutions leaves us with this one provocative question. Is the price of worldly validation, whether it's financial ruin, the loss of identity, or the slow erosion of a sacred mission, is that a price worth paying? It's a question every church, every school, and really every one of us has to answer for ourselves. What is the true cost of the world's approval?